Thanks a lot, Deborah. That's a hard act to follow. The theme for tonight is incarceration as racist response to Black civil rights advances. The fact that some African Americans have experienced great success in recent years does not mean that something akin to a racial caste system no longer exists. Any candid observer of American racial history must acknowledge that racism is highly adaptable. Jim Crow eventually replaced slavery, but now it too had died, and it was unclear what might take its place. Barred by law from invoking race explicitly, those committed to racial hierarchy were forced to reach for new means of achieving their goals according to the new rules of American democracy. In the late 1960s and 1970s, two schools of thought were offered to the general public regarding race, poverty, and social order. Conservatives argued, thank you, that poverty was caused not by structural factors related to race and class, but rather by culture, particularly Black culture. Liberals, by contrast, insisted that social reforms such as war on poverty and civil rights legislation would get at the root causes of criminal behavior and stress the social conditions that predictably generate crime. In October 1982, President Reagan officially announced his administration's war on drugs. At the time, he declared this new war. Less than 2% of the American public viewed drugs as the most important issue facing the nation. This fact was no deterrent to Reagan, for the drug war from the outset had little to do with the public concern about drugs and much to do with public concern about race. The war on drugs, cloaked in race-neutral language, offered whites opposed to racial reform a unique opportunity to express their hostility toward Blacks and Black progress without being exposed to the charge of racism. As law enforcement budgets exploded, so did prison and jail populations. In 1991, the Sentencing Project reported that the number of people behind bars in the United States was unprecedented in world history, and that 1/4 of young African American men were now under the control of the criminal justice system. Despite claims that these radical policy changes were driven by fiscal conservatism, the desire to end big government and slash budget deficits, the reality is that government was not reducing the amount of money devoted to the management of the urban poor. More than 2 million people found themselves behind bars at the end of the 21st century, and millions more were relegated to the margins of mainstream society, banished to a political and social space not unlike Jim Crow, where discrimination in employment, housing, and access to education was perfectly legal, and where they could be denied the right to vote. 90% of those admitted to prison for drug offenses in many states were Black or Latino. Yet, the mass incarceration of communities of color was explained in race-neutral terms, an adaptation to the needs and demands of the current political climate. The new Jim Crow was born.